everybody, welcome to the Unconventional Therapist Guide to Nothing. My name is Dave, and I'm joined here with my co-host, Greg. And Greg, today is Veterans Day that
It
we are
is.
recording on. We were just chatting about that, actually. So,
Okay.
Greg, you are a vet,
hmm
so thank you for your service,
Thank you for
jumping out of
saying that, dude.
jumping out of helicopters and such.
We did all that stuff. And today I ran a 5K, the Veterans Day 5K.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And I came in seventh for my age group.
Wow. The over
Yeah.
50 age group. That was amazing.
That's
Seventh?
very funny, dude. That's hysterical.
Is that why you're still sweating?
Yeah. No, I've just came back from the hospital. It brought me back to life.
Oh boy. So Greg, before you get into your shtick,
hmm
I kind of want to not get political, but just at least take an acknowledgement that the election happened last week. We alluded to it in our last episode because we actually recorded the last episode the day before election day. Um, and I know that there is, a pretty divided nation at this time, and the election results, um, for some were shocking, for some were very triumphant.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, 50% of people are happy, 50% of people are sad, right?
Yeah, I got a little soapbox I want to stand on real quick.
All right, let's hear it.
I think that it's really important for us all to remember that there is ultimately only going forward. There is no going back, right? And in order for the election to have any importance, any significance, we need to all work together, regardless of who won or who lost, right? We have to, at some point, accept what the results are and decide what we want our nation to become. And there is no way for us to do that if we are constantly at odds with each other. So for those who are happy about the results, congratulations. For those who are upset about the results, condolences. I get both sides, I guess, to some extent. I can
Yeah,
understand.
of course. Yeah. I mean,
I
no one knows why people like vote the way they vote. And to get on that, my own soapbox and to like even say to people like you're dumb because you vote this way, you're dumb because you vote that way. That hasn't been working. You know what I mean? Like it just
Oh,
hasn't
it's
been working.
divided our nation completely.
Yeah.
And I have my thoughts about why all that exists, but I don't think that's helpful in today, right? Right
hmm
now, that's not a helpful thing for us to sit here and debate why the way things are. But I do understand that we are going to be in significant danger if we don't work on healing and moving forward and a level of ACT, some acceptance in
Yeah.
this is what it is right now. And we will have some time of this. And then at some point, we might have change or we might have more of the same. But ultimately, we need to stop letting this be the thing that fuels hate, anger, conflict, all that stuff. And I get the reasons that hate, anger, conflict, and all that stuff exists, but it is not helpful and it is tearing our nation apart.
Yeah, and it almost seems purposeful and silly if you really step back and look at we are the people that are arguing with each other, the people that are at odds with each other are so similar. We're not the millionaires or billionaires, right? We're the people who are just trying to figure out how they're going to make that enough money to, pay for groceries and the roof over their heads and all those things. Like we're not like it's like for us to be at odds with each other, it just seems so I don't know, insidious. It's like people keep us busy being at odds with ourselves so that like, and maybe this is conspiratorial, but so that other things can be going on, more important things, and we don't even notice. Because if we all kind of are like, hey, look, this is what we want America to look like as the, middle class, lower class, however we want to frame it, the people without all the money,
Yeah.
then, like if we all kind of were together as a strong unit, there would be these huge corporations and powerful people would have no power over us at all, right?
Right.
It's just
Neither side represents us, honestly.
exactly that's
Like
the problem.
we're not electing people who really ultimately care about us
No,
on
no,
on that kind of level. No.
or
And
understand us.
and to think that we are putting people in office that really do care about us is bonkers because
hmm
there's no way people who have that level of power, that level of authority, that level of money, financial wealth, can ultimately understand what it's like to be middle class when they're at that point. Maybe that's where their roots are, but trust me, they're far from their roots at this
Yeah,
point.
right, exactly.
So we need to work on coming together so that our existences can be a little easier, a little happier, and a little less I don't know, just miserable.
Right. I mean, and Dave, to get us into today's topic, to talk about another terrifying experience, uh, not remembering who you are,
Mm.
like forgetting your past and forgetting how, like, if you don't know the things that have happened to you or the people that you've met and the sacrifices that you've made and the triumphs that you've had, like, you don't know how to orient yourself in the future. Like, how scary it must be to not know yourself. It's essentially what it is, right? And it's as scary as it is for the person, and we'll talk about that. Dave, like how heartbreaking for family members. Now I was like interested to ask you this because in my own life I have some of this, but do you have any experience with dementia in your family?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, do
Yep.
you want to like talk a little bit about that?
I think I've shared this in the past, but my grandmother had dementia and then ultimately progressed. It was Alzheimer's, and she if I had to take a guess of how many years in total she had, I want to say it was a few years that we knew dementia was present, and but ultimately she lived about a year in a nursing home with Alzheimer's
Yeah.
prior to her passing. So yeah, that was very tough to watch for me.
It is, and I remember similarly my grandmother, who was one of the funniest people I've ever known. um I started to notice like we'd all sit around the table and just kind of like talk, and she would tell jokes and we'd laugh, and it would be sort of she would say a little story, and then she would say that exact same story just like a few minutes later, and we'd all be
Yeah,
like, this is a little strange,
yeah,
and then obviously it's progressive, which is awful because that means it's just going to keep getting worse and it's there's no turning back. um, but we watched it turn her into someone that she just wasn't, like the complete personality change, frustration, anger on someone that just it's almost like it's such a sad thing to watch happen, to watch someone like lose themselves, and it messes with the memory of them and it messes with a lot of different things. It's just really difficult disorder that we're going to talk a little bit about today. We can't really get into everything when it comes to
yeah.
dementia and Alzheimer's because that would be hours long. But we're going to do an overview and maybe touch upon this down the road.
Yeah. And yeah, I think that our intention is to at some point give Alzheimer's its own episode so we can talk about the stages of Alzheimer's and tips for caregivers is really important. So we'll do that the next time we touch on this subject. So today's intention is really just to look at dementia and some of the other diagnoses of dementia other than Alzheimer's.
Yeah,
So this was a pretty shocking stat. There are more than 55 million people with dementia worldwide, and the number is expected to almost triple by 2050. So that feels like a scary number.
it is.
And it's another one of those things that it makes you wonder why that's you know, estimated to happen.
I have my thoughts when it comes to why that is, and I think it goes beyond. I think people are like sitting in their cars or walking or working out, listening and saying, "Well,
Or
yeah, people are living a lot longer and
or cuddling with
deterioration."
their partners while they
Maybe they're doing
watch
a little
us on
cuddle.
YouTube.
And you know what? Cuddling with your partners, not a bad way to prevent some symptoms of dementia. And
Like
we can
the end
talk
of the
about that.
Notebook, right? Isn't that what they do? They
Absolutely.
aren't they cuddling as they tell their story?
That was more of a, like you say, an acceptance cuddle. I mean, not funny, but like, you know what I mean? We've gotten to a point there where there's no, every once in a while, a little memory here and there, but, although great call on a movie. I mean, that's a great, I don't want to say a great dementia movie, but I mean, when I was thinking of movies to bring up, I thought of that movie Memento.
Oh yeah.
Great
You know, it's
movie.
funny, Greg. As you were turning your head, I was going to ask if maybe you had some memory issues because I noticed you might have forgot the brim of your cap. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll see what I mean.
Yeah. So, and you know, it's funny that you say that. I mentioned it. I will mention it later on when we talk about symptoms, though. I think I kind of do worry
Oh
about
boy.
something.
Oh boy.
Okay.
Here we go.
And I'm
Here we
also
go.
a hypochondriac, so
Yeah,
who knows,
I was
right?
gonna say.
So, so Dave, there's before we get into exactly what this is and the symptoms and everything like that, there's like
Yeah.
this element of something. Um, it's a little bit difficult to kind of put into words. So recently, and as recently as today, I mean, I watched this Christmas movie called The Family Man with Nicolas Cage. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
Is that the one where the weatherman? No, that's the weatherman.
That's probably the Weatherman. Yeah, no. In this one, so he has this point, like a choice point, like a DBT or a
Yeah.
choice point where it's like he could go one way or the other, and he's going to either stay with his girlfriend from college or go off and get the big job in London. And he goes off and gets the big job in London, and he makes all this great money and everything like that. And he does this good deed, and an angel sends him back thinking, it's a good thing, but he wakes up and it's his what his life would have been had he stayed with that woman.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of funny. But what's going on here is like, so imagine he wakes up, he's with his family, but he has no memory of them at all. And so he appears crazy, even though he's perfectly sane. And I think there's something interesting about that when you're in a state of psychosis, you feel like you know something that nobody else knows. And that's what makes you crazy. So people not understanding you and not getting you, that's what's kind of making it even worse. But that's kind of what's going on, like in a hyperbolic sense here, where it's like you wake up one day slowly, but you do start to wake up, and then you're around these people who are your family who know you a certain way. And your relationship isn't the same with them anymore because you don't have those memories that you guys have built over time. It's almost like when we talked about Capgras and you're around certain people and they make you feel a certain way. And that's because of like the moments that you've shared together that built those emotions and that relationship. So when he wakes up with his family, that's his, and they all think that they've had all these moments together, and he doesn't feel that way. Can you imagine how you butt heads like that? So, anyways, I guess what I'm saying is if you lose your memory and your family, they don't understand you anymore, and you don't understand them anymore, and you're pretty much left lonely and confused. And I thought that movie did a really good job of kind of laying that out. And
Yeah, that was their intention, was to make a dementia movie, a dementia
a very
Christmas movie.
dementia Christmas.
I feel like that might have been an interpretation, but that's a pretty nice pretty nice correlation there.
Thank
I mean,
you.
I mean, I guess this goes back to, again, it's really hard to find things that are just geared towards dementia
Hmm.
versus Alzheimer's. Like we talk about Alzheimer's way more than we just talk about dementia, I feel like, as a society. Like the term dementia, I feel like is being used more now, but like historically, you always hear people talk about Alzheimer's.
Because
Um,
it's like it's an umbrella, isn't it?
it
I
is
mean,
dementia is an umbrella, and then Alzheimer's is like but it's the most prevalent type
okay.
of dementia, which we'll talk about later. But there's a movie called Still Alice with, and I referred to this last week when I was giving a hint about what the episode is, and that's with Julianne Moore, and she's a younger woman who actually starts to develop Alzheimer's. And for people who are interested to kind of check that out, like that we'll talk more about that when we talk about Alzheimer's. But yeah, that's a really scary thought to even think about the difference of losing it as like an elderly person versus when you're young. So that's, it's another you know way to look at this as well.
Yeah, Dave, when we're talking about dementia, we're talking about symptoms that affect memory. Obviously, we're talking a lot about memory here, and with that is like social function and even thinking, right? So, but really, I think it really does that come down to the memory piece and the loss of memory, which
Yeah.
sometimes, like I was saying, Dave, I feel like I do struggle with, like recalling an actor's name or like a song. If you hear a song, you're like, "Who the hell sings this?"
Greg, what the hell are you talking about? You randomly recite quotes, obscure like books and references, and like I'm like, what the hell is wrong with this person? And now I'm like thinking that even more because what are you saying?
No,
Oh, I'm
and
so
this was
sorry you couldn't think of Sugar Ray when you were telling people about like your top 5 artists of
yeah.
all time, right? Like you couldn't think of his name, but like you thought of some random quote from Sophocles and
Yeah, you're right. You're right about that kind of stuff. But you've done it though, right? Where you've heard the song or you get that tip of the tongue feeling and it's
yeah.
almost panic inducing when you're like, I
But
don't
that's
want to look
but
at my
that's your
phone.
but once that happens, your brain stops properly functioning, which is why you can't think of it
That's a good point.
because there's the pressure going. It's like I heard this thing and it like really changed the way I started to look at arguments. When your amygdala is fired up, you're not processing information wrong. And that's why when you say, like, if you ever say something like, you always do that, and they say, well, give me an example, and you cannot think of one example,
Yeah,
that's because of your brain's processing, like, slowing down, so you're not able to retrieve those examples. So you can't say that anymore. You can't say you always do this, because when someone says give me an example, you're not going to be able to think of an example. And then later on when you're calm, you're going to be like, oh, why didn't I say this, why didn't I say that, I have like 50 examples.
absolutely.
So I
And
think
that's why
what
you
you're
gotta wait.
describing is that pressure and just your brain processing, like feeling the pressure, and it's just not happening.
Absolutely. And if that's scary to you, and the people have definitely related with that, like give me an example because I've definitely been there. Or like I can't think of the name of this song. I don't want to look at my phone, but I'm going to because it's going to drive me nuts. And just imagine how scary that would be if you could never retrieve it, and even not even have the presence of mind or the able to follow through with thoughts to go seek it out. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the thing. I think it's different in the way that it's like less curious, more like, wait, who are you? How do
yeah,
I know you? Okay. Like I'll never forget this moment I had. It was funny, sad, but like mostly funny. I went to go visit my grandmother and I had on like the visitor sticker. And she goes, "Oh, what do you do here?" And she looked at my sticker. She goes, "Oh, you visit people." I'm like, yes, that's who I am. I'm the visitor. And like I just did my visit with her just as a visitor.
yeah,
Because
yeah,
like
yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't bother with like the whole spiel, because like after a while you just stop reintroducing yourself
I
or
swear,
explaining, right?
I was so close to just being like, "Well, Dave, how did that make you feel?" Um,
I found it rather like funny, and my grandmother always made me laugh. Like she was, like you said with your grandmother, my grandma was like very unintentionally funny sometimes. She was like the most anxious person, and it would just make me laugh. So like I just found it cute, and I was like, I went with it.
no, it is cute, and my grandmother did similar things to the point where it was like I was almost feeling bad for her because it must be terrifying in a way because my son, who you know well, Jack.
Mhm.
He would walk in with me and she would be like, "Oh, little Greg's here." And she would grab him
Yeah,
and hug him and everything like that. And then I'd be like, "Okay." So she's thinking that's her
he's
grandson
you.
Greg,
Yeah,
right? But who the hell does she think I am?
yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah. I had a few moments where she thought I was my grandfather at some points, because there is like and again we're talking about Alzheimer's a little bit, I think, but there
Hmm.
is like a mental regression almost, that was pretty fascinating. So, did you know this stat that dementia is the seventh leading cause of death globally?
So I did see that stat, but I was wondering like, and this is going to sound ignorant, but how does it cause death? Is it just the deterioration of
Yeah,
brain
yeah,
function?
right,
Okay.
right.
Okay. To the point where like autonomic function ceases
Well,
to
we'll
exist?
get into the different examples of what different types of dementia, and I think
Yeah.
that makes more sense when you think about some of them. Like some
Yeah,
of
like the
those,
buildup of proteins and the blocking of
right?
vessels and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right. So some of the symptoms here, obviously, we're talking about them. I don't want to say memory loss again, but I will. Problems finding words, I think, and it's not what you're thinking in terms of problems finding words. It's like literally not knowing like words that you use every day.
Yeah, yeah,
Trouble with spatial awareness and vision, complex tasks, obviously, and problem solving and planning and organization, and just all the things that you are required to live like a normal functioning life. Just confusion and disorientation, and just a really difficult time.
right,
Um, and just the psychological changes that happen have a ton to do with the literal changing of your personality, Dave. Which is I can't imagine taking that from somebody. And when we talk about one of these forms of dementia, we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But obviously, the frustration can cause depression and anxiety. How much anxiety is caused when I don't really know who I am. I don't know how can you know what you want to do next or know how to make the next choice if you're not even informed enough about your own existence to know who you are. I mean, you're agitated. You behave inappropriately because you forget kind of social norm, right? You're
Right.
paranoid. I mean, you could even be hallucinating with some forms of dementia. It's a very scary
Sure.
thing.
There are some parts of it that it's almost um it feels like maybe it's harder for the people around them though, because there is this like ignorance. Like you're not
Yeah,
sitting there reflecting. You know what I mean?
right,
So they're not. It's not like they're like I never was like this. You know, for some cases, I would say. So I don't want to say anything's a blanket statement here because obviously the dementia affects everybody differently, and it can look many different ways. But there is this idea that there is some presentations that are like it's not like the person is sitting there and understanding that they're changing, right?
right.
But it's very hard for the caretakers, the family, the friends, and the loved ones of that person because they're watching someone actively change and
Yeah, it's like
decline.
psychosis in that same way, where it's like you don't really when you're going into a psychotic state or even manic state, you don't really notice it. You kind
Yeah.
of think everything's sort of you're not really going to notice it.
Right. Right.
And other people are going to notice it more than you are,
Yeah.
obviously, like family members.
Yeah.
And just seeing it kind of happen slowly.
And I'll definitely touch on this a lot more in when we do Alzheimer's specifically because actually that's been a part of the work that I do is helping people learn how to support people with dementia and Alzheimer's.
Mm,
I do have two individuals currently that I work with at my other job where I work with people with developmental disabilities in residential settings. And I work with two of them currently who are experiencing dementia symptoms. One's very recent and one has been like ongoing. And it's imagine dementia with also cognitive
oh.
deficits and things like that and other mental health disorders. It's a lot on the people that are taking care of them, so there's a
So I think
lot to be
that
talked about in that realm.
absolutely, in terms of like intellectual deficits, it's like when we talk about some of the ways to prevent, you know, to prevent quote unquote the best you can against biology and genetics, it's gonna have to do with like continued learning and like difficult thinking and trying to expand your vocabulary and try to expand your knowledge and being a lifelong learner like we try to be here.
Yeah, but
That's
Greg, the
super
the
helpful.
people that I was describing are not
Right.
able to
So
be
that so
lifelong
and no, and
learners.
that's what I'm saying. And that's why I read this statistic that people with Down syndrome have like a huge super high percentage of
Yeah,
them,
yep,
have dementia or Alzheimer's
yeah.
in middle age. So it's like that's makes sense
and
in a
and
sense.
you know what else is really interesting? So one of the women that I support is like she's probably average, like a little bit below average IQ, but she's also on the autism spectrum, and she asks repetitive questions. She's rather sharp, and like she can hold a conversation, but she'll ask repetitive questions. Like she'll ask if she can call her brother, or she'll ask what's for lunch, and then like 3 minutes later she'll ask what's for lunch, and if she
Yeah.
can call her brother. And some of it, it's the interesting thing is like if you only look at it for dementia, you're like, you're trying to like solve that tool. But then also there's the autism part as well, which kind of like also lends itself for some of that repetitiveness. So
Sure.
it's hard sometimes to understand like what's from what, what's causing
Yeah.
what.
Is it like
Um,
repetitive or is it like hyperfixation kind of?
exactly. That's kind of what I mean.
Yeah.
So like that's been a challenge to kind of, but I mean, we just develop tools regardless to help so that we don't have to constantly answer the same questions over and over. Um,
Yeah.
but anyways, causations of dementia. So damage to or loss of nerve cells and their connections in the brain. And these symptoms can really depend on the area of the brain that's damaged. And also, as I mentioned, dementia can affect people differently. So even if it's damage in the same area, doesn't mean two people are going to have the exact same presentation.
Right. Yeah. I wonder if that would People with MS, they have like it's like a myelin deficiency. It's the coating of the axon over that
You just
connect.
sound like Dr. Beauvais when you said Mylon. I just thought of him. I had a
Oh
flashback
yeah.
to
Well, well, you want to know why? I do know quite a lot of bit about it, and it's not because of any kind of school. It's because my
sure.
uncle, who I was very close with, like died from MS,
Hmm.
and so I don't remember him having a ton of dementia symptoms, but he did have tons of nerve cell damage because
Okay.
the connections were gone, and I
Like,
wonder like
this is totally ignorant, and maybe we should do an episode on MS just
I
so I
really
can
think we should,
not
but go
be,
ahead.
um, like Parkinson's type syndrome.
Yeah, in a
But
sense,
that's a type of dementia.
Parkinson's is, yeah, and I wonder if MS, maybe there is some towards the end maybe. But I know that he can't, like, he stopped being able to move his legs and his arms, and
Uh,
it's just, oh, that was
yeah.
like a progressive thing that's really hard to watch too. All really sad. And let's talk about, speaking of progressive, because who doesn't love to talk about progressive illnesses? Let's talk about some of these progressive types of dementia.
Yep.
Obviously, we're not going to get too deep into Alzheimer's, but that's a lot of these are, like, exist because of clumps of proteins and tangles in your brain. And tangles are fibrous masses made up of, guess what, protein. We're going to see a lot of that. It's making me a little, too much of a good thing, huh? Like, protein is a super dangerous and super helpful component in your body. It's a weird kind of setup, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Someone in my, just outside my family has just suffered Dave, maybe like 4 years older than us, vascular dementia. And it
Wow.
appeared through a stroke. So that's when your vessels in the brain are damaged and affect the blood flow and connectivity in the brain, and can show up as a dementia, obviously, and dementia too. But like the stroke part, can you imagine having a stroke in a
No.
couple of years? I mean,
Yeah.
thanks.
No, that's sad. Did you? I didn't know this, but vascular dementia, which honestly, this is like the first I'm really even like hearing that term. I never really hear that term. Is the second most popular type, which kind of shows you. I think actually that highlights to me more how popular Alzheimer's is,
Yeah,
being
no
the
kidding.
first most popular type. The fact that the second most you barely ever hear about.
I don't like to think about the cardiovascular system because I just don't think, like, all those veins and blood and the opening of valves of hearts and possible blockages. It's just like, I'd rather not.
Yeah,
I'd rather
yeah,
not
I
think of
don't
the
like that.
plaque building up. You know what I mean? And like, where could it be? Am I a
Kind of
ticking time
grosses me
bomb?
out when I think of plaque and like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
gross.
Here's one that was interesting to me for a couple of different reasons. So Lewy body dementia is one that I had heard of. Um, and it's again, it's like clumps of protein in the brain, similar to Alzheimer's, similar to Parkinson's, and it causes you to do a couple of different things. It causes you to act out your dreams in your sleep, which can be dangerous. It causes
Mm.
you to hallucinate in your waking hours. Loss of memory, obviously. You're losing yourself, in other words. Now, this is something that Robin Williams suffered from. And can you imagine someone like Robin Williams losing your memory, your identity, your movement, and your mental processing speed? Like, that's his whole essence. Like, can you imagine what that must have been like for him? So when people are like, show pictures of Robin Williams smiling, and they're like, hey, like, depression can do this. Yes, depression is an insidious disease that can affect anyone, and you could not even know it at times. But Robin Williams was going through this different thing where, like, who Robin Williams was leaving Robin Williams.
Okay. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Hmm.
he was like maybe getting glimpses of that. It obviously it was
Again, like, and the other thing with him is like, as much as he's a comedian, like I heard this really in depth, very depressing conversation between him and Philip Seymour Hoffman, where I'm like, there's this
watched
whole
that
other
too.
side to him that people like they were just kind of talking about the pain and suffering in life, and it's like there's a lot more than just comedy for this person, and mix that with depression and a very serious illness like this, like Lewy body dementia. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
scary.
absolutely. And that conversation is haunting
Yeah.
because they both, you know,
Both of them have committed suicide. Yeah. Yeah.
it's just like so scary. And then that like it's like that Carl Jung thing where he talks about, um, you know, knowing your own darkness is the best way to see darkness in others. And if you can see darkness in others, then you can kind of alleviate that pain. And it's like, wow, those two people were having this conversation. They're like, in that moment, that must have been so helpful because they're like, this guy understands me. He sees
Yeah.
me. He can like he's been there, and they can kind of relate to
Or
each
it was like, yeah, he's right. Life sucks.
other.
And
Oh
it
no, yeah,
wasn't
I
super
guess that's
helpful.
another way to go. Yeah. Well, I
Wow.
guess.
Hey, great way to just pull that quote out of the top of your head like that.
Thanks, thanks, Dave. I appreciate that, buddy.
Let's see if you can name an artist now who sang Mambo number five.
Lou Vega.
Wow. See? And you were worried about your memory. Isn't that your like second
Uh,
favorite song
no, no, it's
of
not.
all time?
It's up there. I'll tell you that.
Definitely on your playlist.
All right, so where do we go from here? The one I'll do one more. So frontotemporal dementia is when the nerve cells in the front part of your brain break down, and this is the area that we all know is associated with like personality and planning and thinking and judging and being you. Um, this breaks down, and I wonder. I didn't look into any stats on this, but I wonder if this is like, could this be cause for um, impulsivity, like dangerous behavior? This is like
Sure.
serial killer stuff too, right? Like lost.
Well, that definitely seems like it could be as well. But then, like, I thought you were actually going to go a different route before you said serial killer. I was going to say because like there's other disorders that are linked to dementia, and one of those is traumatic brain injury,
Yeah,
which I thought you were going to go more towards like that angle. But yeah, serial killers probably. Yeah,
that one too,
maybe
right? You
serial killers.
you
Yeah.
fall off the swing when you're a kid, and better watch out for that one, right?
Yeah, so traumatic brain injury is a condition that's caused by repetitive head trauma, and the symptoms really, as I mentioned before, they depend on the part of the brain that's injured, and it can cause depression, explosiveness, memory loss, impaired speech. It can also cause slow movement, tremors, and stiffness, and the symptoms actually may not appear until years after the trauma. I know some like obvious examples of this. Aaron Hernandez. Um,
Oh,
they did talk about his brain having so much trauma to it that
mm.
I forget what kind of like it was
CTE.
CT. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the term I was trying to think of. And Junior Seau, former football player
And
as
the
well, who
guy,
committed suicide.
was it Benoit, Chris Benoit,
Oh, the wrestler.
the wrestler? Yeah.
He was. Yeah, that's right. Him as well. Um, yeah, traumatic brain injury. That's a tough one as well.
So
That
that traumatic brain injury they must have been frontal, right?
I
It was probably everywhere,
So
but
I worked with an individual too who had traumatic brain injury, and unfortunately he's passed as well. But it was interesting. I used to always think of his brain as being like like a film, like when you watch like a strip of film from like a
Mhm.
movie or something like that, and you see all like the different clips. It's almost like his. I would envision his brain, his thoughts being like a strip of film, but then you had random things spliced in there. So like we would have like this perfectly fine conversation. Then I would just like look over at him after a few minutes, and then like suddenly he was sitting there stewing about something that had and he would be like come out with some like outlandish or just like not prevalent thought and be
Yeah.
mad, and then it would cause him to have like really aggressive behavior, and it was like so hard to predict at times because it would literally feel like it was just spliced into his thought process. And that was like his existence, and that was really sad to see because there was really nothing you could do that could to prevent it. It was just the way his brain was operating.
That
And that was from a car accident actually, but he did
was
have also had some cognitive disabilities as well.
prior.
I believe so, but that's kind of not known.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting thing there. But I believe he might have been born with some cognitive delays and then also had a car accident.
Dude, that was some good visualization. I could picture what was going on in that person's mind. Good job with that.
Yeah, I don't know why I thought of that, but I used to actively think about that process like while I was working with him, and it kind of because I think it also sometimes you have to like think of things to help yourself understand
Like conceptualize him. Yeah.
or yeah, to be able to accept it a little easier because it was really hard to work with him when like suddenly he would just be you do something nice and then suddenly he's like charging at you.
And then you hear that sound of like the film reel just slapping over and over again. You're like,
Yeah.
oh no, we're in trouble now.
Right, we're in trouble. Yep. Huntington's disease is another one that's linked to dementia. So that causes certain nerve cells in the brain and spinal cord to waste away, which is really sad. And symptoms include a decline in thinking skills, known as cognitive skills, and then these symptoms can usually appear around age 30 or 40. So
Oh
that's
wow, so that's
rather
just
young.
sitting there though, and see, it's rather young, but like if you're 25, you don't know like this thing's kind. It's almost like schizophrenia, where that can pop up when you're 30 years old.
So it's sad because like if you knew maybe there was I don't know if there's like ways they can kind of reverse that process if you knew that this was happening, but if like
Yeah,
it takes time to for this to happen, you're probably catching it too late, I would assume,
I
right?
would. Yeah. Hmm.
The damage is probably done. There's another one here that I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of this.
Okay.
Creutzfeldt Jacobs disease. Have you ever heard of that?
No,
Am I saying that completely wrong? I have no idea.
listen, I'm not German.
It's a rare brain disorder that usually occurs in people without known risk factors, and the condition might be due to deposits of infectious proteins called prions.
Mm.
Symptoms of this fatal condition usually appear at an age of 60, and its symptoms are memory problems, behavioral changes, poor coordination, visual disturbances, dementia, and comas.
Wow. So proteins, watch out.
Again, this is a infectious protein.
Yeah.
Parkinson's disease, which I mentioned earlier. So many people with Parkinson's disease eventually develop dementia symptoms. When this happens, it's known as Parkinson's disease dementia. The symptoms can include tremors, stiffness, slow movement, difficulty with balance and coordination, and difficulty speaking. Other symptoms might include mental and behavioral changes, sleep problems, depression, memory difficulties, and fatigue.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
That's always
um,
been one that's really hard to see too.
Parkinson's
Parkinson's, what
itself,
a
I
and Lou
know.
Gehrig's disease. I just recently, like I was telling you last week, read weekends at Morris, Tuesdays at Morris, and like that's what ALS and these diseases that are just
Yeah.
progressive
Michael
and
J. Fox was
deteriorating.
just in Rhode Island last weekend for Comic Con, and unfortunately didn't get a chance to see him because they hide him behind a curtain. But
Legend though.
I saw some of his like photos with people that he took online, and yeah, that would have been an amazing experience. But they charged quite a bit to meet him, so
Oh, I
I didn't
bet,
do that.
right?
I didn't
Yeah,
do it, but I wish
and
I had.
I'll tell you, like even his work on see, I'm losing like Larry David's show, Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Oh yeah.
He's like great on that. I mean, so he's still great, and he's like, I seems
He
to
still
be
has his
strategy.
personality.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's like there's something that's still there with him that like you still can connect with and you know it's him. But like it's so sad and like that's a perfect example of someone who like he's been in the public eye throughout this whole process. We remember him obviously from like Back to the Future days and Teen
Teen
Wolf
Wolf.
and
Yeah.
I have so many deep cuts of movies with him that I always loved. Bright Lights, Big City. Did you ever read that? I feel like that's a
No,
book you
but
don't like
there's
that style of book actually. So that's like reminds me of like he's part of like that Bret Easton Ellis like
oh
brat
yeah, no, that's
literary brat pack that you didn't really care for. Um,
I liked one when he was like making money. Like something.
Secret of My Success was one of my
Yeah,
favorites back in
that's
the
a good
day.
one.
I used to watch that on repeat. But then we've obviously seen his symptoms progress over the years, and that's someone in the public eye seeing that is like it. In some ways, I guess it's a positive learning experience for people to see what Parkinson's does to someone. Obviously, it's you know not good, but it's like it's important. I think for us to understand things like that.
Hmm.
I guess I don't know. So some conditions can mimic dementia. So there are some times where it might seem like someone has dementia, but there could be things going on like vitamin B12 deficiency, infections, hyperthyroidism, and normal pressure hydrocephalus. Some medications can also cause symptoms similar to dementia. So, with everything, obviously, you want to get a full medical checkup and go through all the tests before you just start saying, "Oh my goodness, I have dementia."
Right. Like I was earlier.
Yes.
But we'll keep you posted on that. So the nun study, have you heard this?
Nope.
So they did this
Yeah,
study.
I've actually heard this. Yeah.
Yeah, like I vaguely remember hearing something about it, but they did
Yeah.
this study on like 700 nuns. It was decades long. I love when they do these decades long studies. They did one at Harvard about happiness, and then they got some good insights on that. Um, but they had some really cool outcomes when it came to dementia and Alzheimer's. So one was that continued education. So they keep saying like the ones with higher level degrees were resistant to dementia, but I don't think it has anything to do with degrees. I think it has to do with interest and
Learning,
learning. Yeah, and like trying to like
keeping
stay
your brain
with your
sharp.
brain. Yeah, that's all. Um, the same thing when they talked about like complex vocabulary. But what was a bigger deterrent of like dementia and Alzheimer was the ones that wrote positive entries in their journals, meaning like they seemed to be happy and they seemed to have some gratitude, they were significantly less likely to become symptomatic for whatever reason. So
Who
that's
conducted this study?
that's in the study, yeah. Like it's self-care,
Who,
community, all seems to be
the
important.
ones who truly believed in God and their faith never
Yeah.
wavered.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. There's something to do with like the way you're thinking though. I guess if you're thinking more positively, you're remaining more active and interested. And
I
if
would
you're
love
more
to know the family histories of each of these nuns to know if, there's any, you
the
know.
family sent them away, so I think in most cases.
So like that's the thing that this study seems to be missing in its telling is obviously not every one of these nuns has the same background. You're doing a
Oh yeah,
very
you're talking about like genetics and
general
stuff.
overview. Yeah,
Yeah.
genetics is huge, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, you're right. Um, but can you
I
meet
do I do think it's a
genetics?
great story though.
Yeah,
Just stay
yeah.
happy and go to school.
And you'll remember everything your whole
Yeah.
life. So
But
this
they're
is
nuns. Like what do they like what else can they do for like higher learning?
well, I think that's all they can do, really, right? I
Just
mean,
learn.
just learn
Just learn the good book.
the good book over and over and try to find little extra little things in there, little hidden meanings and gems in there. Um, yeah, no, I don't know. I don't know what they were doing, but I never understood the passion to be, I guess the calling, right? To become a priest or a nun. Although I did think about it when I was young, but
You should do it.
you think they'd still take me? I'm
If you
damaged
want if you
goods.
want Greg to follow the calling, make sure to leave a comment for us, please.
Please. I mean, you missed out on the ghost story. And now I might have to
If
miss out on the
if
priesthood.
if you want to call him Father Greg, please leave a
Yeah,
comment.
I like that. I like that a lot, actually. So, Dave, what else we got on this?
I'm hoping to be called Daddy Dave, actually.
Oh, Father Greg and Daddy Dave.
That's is that a new show right there?
Yeah, I like that a lot. Well, that's after I'm ordained.
Yes, yes, yes. All right. So where are we? Where do we even go? All right.
I,
So
you tell me.
complex vocab uh is a deterrent, was also a
Yeah.
deterrent, but not so the nuns with complex vocabs, is that
I guess, look, that means to get those complex vocabs, they had to do some reading and some they had to have some kind of interest in something, right?
yeah,
There is something about the power of you may be getting more things that you want if you have the powerful vocab because there's something about eloquence and the way that you speak to people that allows you and affords you to get more of the things that you want based on how you talk to them.
Greg, we are a dying breed.
I know, dude.
If you listen to anything in pop culture, if you watch a movie, you listen to music, there is no eloquent vocab happening.
Isn't
It
that
is F bombs galore.
it's a
That's
shame.
it. It is a shame.
It's a shame.
I say this to my younger patients when they come in and they're dropping F bombs and as if it's nothing. I'm just like,
Yeah.
it makes you sound dumb. You sound dumb.
Listen, I'd say the same thing because you want to know what, Dave? It does.
It does. I
It
was
just turned
like,
out. Now, does that mean that we don't
the
drop
best word
F-bombs?
you could think to use. Like, that's it. Wow, you really are dumb. That's what I tell those little kids.
Hmm.
I don't, but
So Jerry Seinfeld says this thing, um, because he works super clean as a comedian,
yeah,
and he's
yeah.
like, if you take the F word out of it, is it funny? And if it's not still funny, then it was never funny.
Right, right.
So I understand what he's saying with that, but at the same time, a nice curse word or something like that really does drive a point home.
Well, then I mean that's the point. It's like when
Yeah.
the less you use it, the more effective it becomes,
Right, right,
right?
right, right,
So I
right.
mean it's like that with any language. Anyways, so aside from being a nun and being happy, there are other things that they say could potentially help.
Hmm.
There's not like a magic cure. Currently, there are some medications that help slow the process, but there is no like reversation pill as far as I know. But they do say some, and I don't know enough about this to even speak on it. Some dementia symptoms can be reversible,
Hmm.
but as far as I know, like the more serious ones are not. And
Okay.
as I mentioned, there are some medications that are currently being used to help slow the process, but there is nothing to eliminate the dementia itself or
Yeah, I think the ones that are probably reversible are the ones that are like drug induced or medication
sure.
induced, or
Yeah.
maybe even some forms of TBI. Um, you can have like malnutrition, like
Right.
whatever it is. There's or even like trauma. So there are
Right.
ones that are reversible, but I think the progressive ones are really the ones
So
we're kind of talking
a
about.
few strategies that people can utilize are cognitive stimulation. So like
Mhm.
doing puzzles or discussing current affairs. My
Just being
grandfather
super
used
bored.
my grandfather used to always do the crossword and the word jumbles. And I do have a soft spot for word jumbles. I love
I
those.
don't even know what a word jumble is.
It's like when they take a word and they mix up the letters and then you have to guess what the word is.
Oh, isn't it like an anagram or something?
No, it's a word jumble, I think.
All right.
It's in the newspaper. um So also another thing that can be helpful, and I'm assuming this would be for like more elderly individuals, but like working on like a life story, sharing memories and experiences, like putting together like a book with like photos and things like that, and kind of being able to look over something that helps kind of keep the memory sharp and like kind of you can also go into like experiences with that. It's also really cool for other people who to like do that with that person. So like I mentioned, I have two individuals who have dementia that I work with, and one of them has like a few photo albums, and it's so cool that like she can remember these like really vivid details of previous situations and like you would never guess that in a conversation with her. So like it kind of breaks her into that, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Like it's a really cool experience.
Wow, what a throwback though. Like something that some people might not ever have is a photo album.
Yeah,
Those are like prized possessions,
photo albums. Yep.
and I don't have any real photo albums with my.
Now it's like Facebook or
Yeah,
Instagram or like those kind of albums, I guess.
what a bummer.
It is kind of a bummer. I mean, we probably store like I have pictures on my laptop and phone. We look through those, but yeah, we don't have like albums, like tangible. Yeah, we got so far away from like tangible things.
What do they call that? Like, it's not like there's a word for that stuff, not vintage, but like
Ephemera.
analog maybe.
Oh, I thought you were talking about ephemera like paper products. Like
Oh, well, I like tangible too. Like something we can put our hands on and kind of
yeah,
like sift through and have it has a smell to it.
like I guess photos would be considered ephemera. Analog
Yeah.
would be like CDs and DVDs and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, yeah. I like it. I like that old stuff.
I like it a lot.
I like it
A
a lot.
lot.
All right.
All right, so I got a scenario to pose to you, a little
Okay.
ethical question.
Sure.
So there's a few people on social media who have family members with dementia or Alzheimer's, and they document on their social media their lives with the family member. And if you read the comments, it's pretty mixed. sometimes it'll be like, oh, you guys take such good care of so and so, and like people get to know this person, this family member with the dementia or Alzheimer's. But then there's other times where it's like, is this exploitation? Like, is if this person really, how would they be able to consent if they're not even fully sure where they are sometimes? Like they're in their child's home because they
Mm.
live with them now. And it's like some days they wake up and they have no idea where they are. And they have to
Yeah.
be re-explained the whole scenario.
Well, how do
Is
we
that
choose
ethical?
to? Yeah, no, so I don't think so. So, because if I'm thinking about how people choose how to, protect themselves, is they use their experiences in their past. Like, I don't want to go through this because, I've seen this or I've done this or this happened to me before. And it's like not having the insight of your past, not having the knowledge of your personality and what you would want. It seems pretty unethical and gross to post someone's decline.
Yeah, ultimately you're
Yeah.
posting some of their toughest moments. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's funny, sometimes, but like also like it's different if it's like your family member and you laugh about it and you find it funny. But like
Yeah.
other people who are finding it funny are like they're not sharing in a joke, they're laughing
No.
at it, right?
They're
Because like
laughing at
you're not
someone. Yeah.
there, you're but like I mean you can find it like cute or you can find it like heartwarming or you can so but here's the flip side of it. It also can be sort of like I said with like Michael J. Fox, it's kind of like educational in some ways
It is
because
educational.
you get to see what it's like for someone who lives with. My issue with it more though is just like there's no ability to consent. It's not like they sat down before I assume they did not sit down before the
Yeah.
person had the dementia symptoms and said, hey, if this ever happens, can we film you? So like they're not really able to say, and then like do they know this like 86, 91-year-old person, do they know what Instagram reels are? Do
No.
they know that they're now on TikTok and and the who benefits from it? The family that is recording and making money off of these if they get to that level where they're monetizing on their videos. On the
Which isn't
flip,
easy to do.
on the flip though, if this person with dementia or Alzheimer's ever went out in public, people might know them. They might already like that person. That
Yeah.
person might become somewhat famous. However, are they really going to be able to benefit from that fame if their memory issues are so significant that they really have no idea what the people that are approaching them are
I
even
I
talking
think
about?
about it for whatever reason. I'm thinking about it like this. Like, when you're in an art studio and well, this never happened to me, but I've seen it in pop culture. But when there's like a model, a nude model, and everyone's like painting them, that's art. That's educational. That's important. Um, if you're staring through someone's window they don't know and you're drawing a picture of them,
Yeah, yeah.
not okay. So it's like
Yes.
I feel like that's the difference.
Yeah,
You know,
right.
educational it still may be, but it's
Right,
wrong.
right.
You know,
Exactly. So I feel like that's kind of where I'm landing too. I would love, if anybody's listening and they have a different opinion or just want to share their opinion on this, please feel free to, comment on the social media post or, reach out to us and let us know. I'm very fascinated to hear other people's thoughts on that
me too.
or comment here on our YouTube video.
Yeah, why not?
Might as well.
Why not?
Um, so yeah, that's the overview of dementia, a not very deep dive into what dementia is, right, Greg?
Right. Deep enough for now.
Okay. All right. Yeah, so all right. Anything else, Greg, for the fine folks who are
No,
listening?
I think that's it for Happy Veterans Day, and let's start rolling into the holidays here.
Start rolling. Greg's rolling on ecstasy into the holidays.
That's it, man. I'm rolling on ecstasy from here to January 2nd.
All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. If you have not yet, we would love if you would take a moment to rate and review. If you're on YouTube, like and subscribe, all that good stuff. And we will, on our end, keep bringing you the finest of fine content. You know what I'm saying?
I agree.
Greg has no freaking clue what I'm
I
saying.
have, I
All
have
right. He's lost. He's still thinking about Sugar Ray.
I'm
All right,
still thinking
everybody,
like, why can't I remember the band names of Sugar Ray members?
because nobody knows them.
Okay, good.
That's like
Mark
asking the
McGrath. Mark McGrath. Whew.
it's like asking the band name members of Maroon 5 other than Adam Levine.
Oh yeah, right. Nope.
Nope.
Yeah.
Did you?
Nope.
Yeah, I was just gonna say something that's probably inappropriate. All right, everybody. On that note, have a great night. See you later, and just be good and
Be with
stuff.
you.
Peace be with you. Good night. Little